Trust me.
Bam!
Yo, Drop the Beat returns Monday at 9:30 only on CBC television.
Flames shot 50 feet in the air today in a fire that broke out in the 70s.
There are some big changes coming to how CBC News operates next week. Changes brought on by budget constraints here at the public broadcaster. The biggest change for viewers in Toronto will involve this program and the people who produce it. Tomorrow, CBLT, Canada's second oldest TV station, will produce its final local newscast in its current form. Next week, a brand new national and local newscast will take its place. So tonight, we thought we'd take a look back. Mike Wise has this look at some of the faces that passed through our local studios over the years.
September 8th, 1952, and CBLT goes on air as Toronto's first television station. Its first image, an upside-down logo of the CBC. After it was corrected came 2.5 hours of live television, including Toronto's first local newscast.
Flames shot 50 feet in the air today in a fire that broke out in the 71-year-old Yonge Street Arcade.
The early days of television in Toronto were staffed with new employees from CBC Radio, hurriedly trained for TV. CBLT came on the air, an attempt by the CBC to provide a Canadian alternative for early television owners watching signals from the United States. CBLT grew, capturing the images of a city coping with the growth and politics of the post-war baby boom.
The Love-In was organized, perhaps too organized, but then, as one of the leaders put it, we want to have another one, right?
Back on the South Lawn, Queen Victoria, whose day after all it was, largely went unnoticed.
From its starting ground in a newsroom at 500 Church Street, CBLT has been providing local news to Toronto for the past 5 decades. One familiar fixture in the latter years, our weatherman, Bill Lawrence, who's seen all sorts of people pass through our doors.
When I started here in December of '74, there was a young Lloyd Robertson reading the news, and now he's done very, very well. Also in those early days, there was a young man, his name was Brian Williams. He came in to audition. He had no script, he didn't use auto cue or teleprompter. He sat down and he did, as we say, the sports.
Now, the Blue Jays had the day off yesterday. Montreal, though, did play, and they shut out the Atlanta Braves by a score.
And he did it because he didn't need any prompting. He knew what he was talking about. He knew his stuff.
And while we're on the subject of planting corn, here's Bill Lawrence.
Hey, good
CBLT
morning.
often served as a training ground for network reporters. Many people who pass through here have gone on to the national or other television networks.
Hi there, Ted Wallishin here once again with Off the Wall.
We'll keep watching those returns as they trickle in.
Last Friday, many CBLT employees, past and present, met for what many jokingly called a wake. One last chance to look back and remember and celebrate the way the show was.
I came because CBLT was so important to me in my career. It was an excellent experience being there, working with Fraser and Bill Lawrence and Brian.
News Hour from CBC Toronto.
There was a different CBC in that era than there is today. You are watching Metro Civic Election 85. And that may very well be just a change in the times. But we were fortunate and we had a good run.
Yes. I had an uncontrollable urge to be here tonight, and I have wonderful memories of my years at CBLT.
I think we delivered the goods in those days, in spite of the odds that were against us.
I'm Robert Fisher, and that's Queen's Park Notebook.
By the mid-1980s, CBLT had evolved to a full production center, producing much more than just local news. There were local specials, weekly current affairs programs, even local dramas, children's programming, and comedy programming, giving a start to some who'd go on to Saturday Night Live.
Sure, why not? They're desperate. They'll buy it.
Plus, we can dump all our clever fish jokes.
Yeah, and our lines won't stink as bad as Stephen Howard's acting.
The Nielsen's have us with the highest Ratings in the history of the station.
By the late 80s, CBLT was the second highest rated newscast in the Toronto market, just behind longtime leader CFDO, our team of journalists winning numerous international awards for excellence.
There was a time when we had lots of money. There was a time when we had a lot of staff. But so do the other stations. The private stations have a lot of money and a lot of staff. But I think no one had the imagination and the creative drive to do the kind of successful series and documentaries that we did. We were allowed to take those risks, and we took them. And we offered the audience, the public, something very distinctive.
This is Parkdale. For the police, it's 14 Division, one of the toughest patrols in town.
But with the arrival of the 1990s came further budget cuts at the CBC and big changes for CBLT. It focused on news only, no other local programming, with an expanded mandate to cover all of Southern Ontario. Despite less staff, fewer resources, and a budget reduced by half, there was still more awards and accomplishments. The program's coverage of this apartment fire in 1995 won a Gemini for the best local newscast in Canada.
Good evening, I'm Bill Cameron. This is 2 Forest Laneway in North York.
I heard so many messages. Some of them said, "Oh my God, the door is closed. You can't turn back." And then at that moment, I was suffocating already.
But this year, faced with more budget shortfalls and increasing competition from the internet and new media, the CBC announced a massive internal reorganization. CBLT's local newscast would be absorbed by a new national newscast. Some former staffers just see it as the latest in a number of changes CBLT has had to go through.
I think there's a huge change coming, and I understand. I mean, this is the kind of party we're having tonight, and believe me, I've seen the death of newspapers and everything. It's kind of a wake, but it's kind of an inevitable wake as we move to different ways of gathering information, and I think the CBC's caught up in that now.
And so that is a sense of where we've come from here at CBLT. Tomorrow night, in our final newscast in this particular format, we'll have a look at where we're going, how the CBC is still going to be providing local news, but in a brand new incarnation. We'll look at Monday's launch of Canada Now, a brand new hour-long, sub-hour national newscast, debuting right here Monday at 6 o'clock. But tomorrow, a couple surprises, including the return of Suhana Marchand. She's going to stop by for one final goodbye. But that's it for now. Ben?
Mike, thank you. When we come back, business and weather with Bill Lawrence.